Excellent. Now we're live. So I'm Jeff Levy. I've had a varied career, but I do a podcast called My Dog Brandy, and it's all about the case hound that I had while growing up in the Boston area and the adventures we had together. And if you don't know what a case hound is, they're basically like 40 pounds walking stomachs. Like they just freaking eat everything in sight. You know, he could be sound asleep in my bed, and if the treat drawer or the refrigerator opened up, man, he would be like right there. If anything else happened, he'd be sound asleep. So and I just launched, I think I told you the story. I just launched the episode when he died and came back to life. Which is
that's an amazing story. Yes.
Yeah, it's an amazing story. So make sure, whoever's watching it, you go, again, My Dog Brandy. That's my only plug. It's on iTunes, Spotify, etc. But I am incredibly excited to have Holly Firestine, who's the Chief People Officer of Ethos Veterinary Health, on. So thank you. And we've known each other for, I think, two years back when I was at Harvard Business Review. And you're so much fun. So
thank you.
So thank you. And this is, for everyone that's watching, this is being recorded. The replay, Facebook will, guarantee you recirculate this in your feed for the next week. So your background is, first of all, let me start. You're new to the Boston area, right? Relatively.
Yeah, we've been here for about 1 year, just a little over 1 year.
So have you? So this is it's a great city. This is before the pandemic. So have you had an opportunity to sort of get out and see everything Boston has to offer?
Not everything, but we made some really good attempts when we first moved in prior to the pandemic to get out every weekend. What we loved about Boston and Massachusetts overall is that people do stuff on the weekends. I've lived in several states, and this is the most active area by far. Oh, and you may hear my two rescue dogs barking right now.
Oh, that's great. That's great. So, bring them in if you want. Bring them in if you want.
I hear them barking downstairs right now. But yeah, we absolutely love it here. It's we didn't move here because of the position. We actually moved here because it actually goes back to when we met, Jeff. When I had won the subscriber promotion for Harvard Business Review and was flown out to meet with Jeff Busgang from Flybridge Capital. And I hadn't been to the Boston area since I was a kid, and I fell in love with it all over again. Went back to where we lived at the time, which was St. Louis, Missouri, and said, yeah, we need to move to Boston. And so we made it happen.
Oh, wow. Wow. So I'm responsible for your move to Boston?
Yes, you and Jeff, for sure. Jeff and I are still in contact 2 years later as well. And yeah, it's been amazing. We have zero regrets. It's probably one of the first times in my life that I just moved someplace because that's where I really thought that it would be great for our family to be, and the lifestyle really matched what our lifestyle was. So, so many times I've moved across the country because of a career opportunity. So it was nice to move because this is just where we felt like we were at home.
Wow. Well, I think that's probably, in my 2 years or so at Harvard Business Review, I think that would probably be the only achievement I've done. So I'm glad there's something I can put like on my resume rather than right now. It's just like I worked there and like a blank base. So
you were responsible for our move. If I had not won the contest, I would not have. We say it all the time. We would not live here right now because I hadn't been out here since I was a kid. So
wow. Wow.
Yeah.
Well, that's great. That's great. Now you have sort of an amazing background, right? You finished an Ironman competition. You're a lifelong learner. Clearly, you're a risk taker. As I said, you seem to be like this adrenaline junkie. If that wasn't enough, you coach executive MBA students, and you're on the board of this organization that I want to get into about pathways to independence, because I think that's amazing. But what's interesting about your background, like if someone was going to ask me like what career you would have, I would not put you're the chief people officer of Ethos. And just so everyone knows, Ethos is an amazing veterinary hospital. I guess I would say system, right, in the United States.
Yeah, it's a network of specialty and emergency hospitals across the country. So we've got 25 locations that really stretch from Northeast to Hawaii. Great.
And so how does an adrenaline junkie get her fix by being the chief people officer of this type of organization?
Well, I'll answer it a couple ways. So I am one of the newer type of CHRO, CPO type people that did not come from an entire career steeped in human resources. I've spent a lot of my career not working in human resources. And so I really kind of fell in love with business first. And then as I started working in business, I really started to fall in love with the people aspect. And so this is kind of a nice bridge for me in this type of role, where an organization like Ethos really understands the strategic business aspect of people and really cares about people and wants to bridge that business strategy with the people strategy. When you really kind of find that sweet spot, you can really advance the business and the people together. And that's the beautiful spot to be in. So I say that because that means I'm really not a traditional HR CHRO type person. I take
not at all.
Yeah, I don't see the people function as one that should be kind of the principal's office and the holder of compliance and all managing every single risk throughout the organization. So I love it because in the right type of organization like Ethos, it's really a creative, innovative position versus the place of no.
Right.
Or the place that, colleagues hear, oh my gosh, the chief people officer is coming, I must be in trouble. That would be my worst nightmare, is to have people view my role as one of, oh my gosh, she only comes and talks to us when we're in trouble, or, we want to present some new way that we can recognize people or really take care of our people in a really new way. And she's going to immediately say no, because that doesn't align with what our handbook says. So, I answer it to say that the type of organization that I can work in this type of role is really a small circle. It depends on how the organization views their people and how they really view this role. If it's a role that is a true strategic partner to the business, or if it's one that's more of an administrative, we'll make all the strategic decisions and then you go do the paperwork.
Mm-hmm. How did you get connected to Ethos?
I was actually contacted by an executive search firm, and it was funny because I have spent the last 20 plus years of my career in human healthcare. And so when I had this outreach from a search firm about something in veterinary medicine, it took me by surprise because I have not gotten that outreach before. And so I had to think about it for a minute to say, gosh, is this kind of a strange path in my career where I'm going to be losing all of that healthcare knowledge that I've gained over the last 20 plus years. And the more I started to research veterinary medicine and Ethos in particular, I realized this close synergy between the practice of human healthcare and the practice of veterinary medicine. And when I toured our hospitals, I thought I was going to walk in and I would feel completely out of my comfort zone, because I wouldn't know any of the technology or the conversations or how they were performing their roles. And in fact, it all was very comfortable. As soon as I started seeing things, I'd say, oh, well, yeah, that's like a digital bedboard in a human hospital. Oh, that position is functioning the exact same way. It's just called something different. But the way that the interaction with the patient and the importance of the quality of care is exactly the same. The work streams are so similar. It's just the patient has 4 legs a lot of the time versus 2, and the patient can't tell you what they're feeling, which I think makes it a really intriguing and difficult practice. If you think about it, I frankly had never thought about, gosh, how does a DVM really understand? Whereas in human health, if the patient's conscious and coherent, they can tell you what's going on or what chain of events led up to the injury. In veterinary medicine, that's not the case. So I had a whole different level of respect for veterinary medicine the more I've really started to understand it. And I'm still just scratching the surface in my understanding, but I love it so much. I've always had my interactions in the front of the house, bringing my pets in. Yes. So it's been fun to understand the what's happening behind the scenes, and it's even more reassuring to see that the compassion and care and commitment and connection is the exact same that you would find in human health care, but probably with a little more complexity since the patients can't speak to you.
Yeah, and I've got to imagine that in human healthcare let's say at a hospital, it's probably rare, and I'm just guessing, that a doctor would sort of fall in love with their patient. But in a veterinary clinic or hospital, that's got to be, it's got to be much easier. And I don't know, maybe it's okay if that happens during those times.
Yeah, I would say, again, kind of going back to these parallels and this connection between human and pet medicine, even from the vet techs, vet assistants, anyone that works within the hospital, that connection that they feel to the patient is the same. You have the same types of challenges with the caregivers and compassion fatigue that you see in human healthcare. So even the things that those workers and colleagues are feeling mirrors what you see in human healthcare, where the compassion fatigue, the emotional strain. When you think of euthanasias that happen, right. It's really hard. But I think same as human healthcare, that people are drawn to it because they have such a passion for caregiving for patients, whether, as we said, whether the patient is a human or an animal. The similarity is that they have a caregiver mentality and they just want to help and make people and animals better. So I would say that there's, the same type of people are drawn to each of the industries where they're a caregiver and really nurturing first. And at times, as somebody who's a chief people officer, really tasked for caring for caregivers, right. who may put themselves second. And I would tell you 99% of the time they put themselves second. It's really hard to appeal to them to say, listen, you've got to take care of yourself at the same time. The more you take care of yourself on your own health and well-being, the better care you can provide. You can't really appeal as much to say, well, it's for your own good to take care of yourself, because they're so focused on the good of others. Right. that type of message doesn't resonate as much as you can say, listen, the more rested you are, the more you've taken care of yourself, the better you can treat those patients who need you so much and who you love and they love you so much. It's kind of like the airlines where they say, put your mask on first before you put the mask on the person next to you.
Exactly.
Same type of thing. Building that resilience in challenging times is everything.
You know, the one thing that came in mind, I've got to ask, because this has been sort of a burning question. When we had Brandy, every time we brought him back from the vet, he insisted that we stop for an ice cream at a soft serve, and he got one, I got one, which I probably ate like half, and he had my half and his. We always thought the veterinary doctor recommended that to him. Do you guys recommend to the patients that you have that to try to connive some treats or an ice cream out of the parents? I'm just curious if this is how widespread this practice is.
I think we would advise our patients and their families that love them so much to do whatever they think will help the patient feel happy and best, and keep them healthy. I happen to have a rescue red retriever who has a weight problem right now. So we are trying to take care of him and maybe not do quite as many treats because now it's affecting his health the negative way.
Yes.
I would say if you look on our Ethos Facebook page, we right now have an Ethos talent competition going on, and these are the pets of our colleagues that they have trained to do all of these incredible things. And so if you want to have some real entertainment and see some animals who have earned their treats, take a look at that. I was watching some of them yesterday, and they're amazing. There's a cat that is missing an arm that does some tricks. There's a horse, some dogs, so all kinds of animals that you'll see our colleagues own. There's a bunny too, if I remember right. Yeah. And so, kind of on that vein where we were talking about the colleagues fall in love with their patients, they absolutely do. So if we have patients that come in that are in need of a home, it wouldn't be unusual for you to find some of our colleagues that have, 6 animals that they've taken in because they've met them through the practice and they need a home. And so they're constantly, either taking them in themselves or they are diligently trying to find, permanent families for these animals in need.
So it sounds like, and by the way, I just want to show a couple of comments. So Lauren is like, we love Holly.
I love you too.
You got, Cindy, hello.
Hey, Cindy.
The organization clearly supports your premise that they tend to fall in. And then Maureen, I used to work with her at Harvard Business Review. So she's definitely in line with the fact that they really can insist that they get ice cream after.
And they have nonverbal cues, right? So I love that insist, because it's not a verbal insistence, but there is some sort of nonverbal cue that she's picking up on that means, yeah, give me ice cream now.
Right. Right. Well,
they speak with their eyes.
Oh, incredibly. And then I remember Brandy, when we would drop, he would be so nervous, which I think is the other thing, is because, first of all, I'm a big believer that there are a lot, dogs are certainly a lot more intelligent than we give them credit for. But I know Brandy would shake when we would bring him into the vet's office, even for something routine, because they're not sure what's going to happen, and you have this challenge of communicating to them. But when we took him back, he would bark as we approached the ice cream place, and you could see, you're absolutely right, in his eyes, like, you either stop for ice cream or you're going to be paying for this later.
Right. So, and kind of that dose response, right? The Pavlov's dog, where they start to pick up, and you've reinforced the behavior, so now they know how to ask for it.
Exactly. I got to believe, we talked about this, the stresses that someone in the veterinary field has when they treat a patient doesn't, at least from my perspective, doesn't seem to get talked about a lot. We talk a lot more about a human caregiver. And I have a very good friend of mine who used to be a top surgeon in Boston, went through the Harvard Surgical Service. And he said the worst thing when he went through surgical residency was working at Children's Hospital and having to tell a parent that a young child was not going to make it. Like he could not, he eventually, he did his rotation and he said, I can't go back there. So I can imagine it's probably similar for someone in the veterinary healthcare. How do you help them sort of manage that stress?
Yeah, I think there's always a focus on how can we better take care of our caregivers and make sure that they have tools, resources, support mechanisms, everything in place that they can access as they want to access. I think you have to have those support mechanisms available, at somebody's fingertips, because, these types of things can actually start to just build up where you feel like you're okay for a while. And then just that aggregation of all of the emotions that have been affecting you that may not have surfaced to your awareness yet are actually there. And so by the time they do surface, it's important that those support mechanisms are available at somebody's fingertips when they need them the most. I would tell you that, my role is really one that has to be focused on those things. I need to have a pulse on how the organization is feeling at all times, and then reconcile that against, how are we positioning our benefits? Do we have the right benefits for people to access where they feel supported and cared for? Just as much as they're caring for their patients, my job is really to care for them and be looking out to make sure that they do have everything that they need. We want an organization that people feel supported, feel happy to come to work, really love their coworkers. And those are the things that help get you through those harder times. The purpose for what you do is huge, right? And so I think that the mission of Ethos, the purpose of the people who work within Ethos is so strong that, it's a calling. And so they've been called to this profession. And our role is to really make sure that they have everything they need to be able to provide the best quality care to patients, but also have a lot of fun at the same time. Your people that you're surrounded with make all the difference in the world. So however we can create this community within Ethos and really support people from whatever state they're in, that's the goal. And so I'm really thankful to have joined Ethos and really understand their commitment. Part of my screening process for them, and I'll remind all job seekers out there right now that, an interview is a two-way street. So don't feel like as a candidate, all of the power is with the company that you're interviewing with. You should be interviewing them at the same time and really understanding if you're going to spend so much of your life with this employer and this particular role, it should really speak to you. And so you should ask those really important questions of your interviewers and of the organization, so you make the right decision too. So I asked a lot of questions around, what is your commitment to taking care of people? And if that's going to cause radical change in the organization, if I come to you with a strategy that is radically different than how you do things today, is that something that you're going to support? And of course, Ethos said yes. So, as a natural disruptor and a risk taker, as you mentioned, my worst nightmare is coming into an organization that doesn't want to do anything different than what they're doing. And my role is one to just maintain, status quo. If there's no opportunity to innovate and think differently and meet people where they are in a really dynamic fashion, I'm not interested. And so that's one of the things I love about Ethos is the commitment. It's actually one of our core values is innovation. So we take that seriously. We actually have a nonprofit that's called Ethos Discovery. So I'll give a little plug for Ethos Discovery because it's a 501c3 that is part of Ethos, and you're not going to find another organization out there that does what we do that has a nonprofit arm.
I've never heard.
Yes. So Dr. Khanna is our president of Ethos Discovery. He is amazing. He actually was on the Rachel Ray show. I think it was back in June with an internal medicine doctor that we've partnered with. That they're between the two of them, they're really working on this animal human health connection, and so it's really kind of intriguing when you think a DVM and a DVM oncologist and an internal med doc are actually collaborating to think about healthcare more broadly. And so what Ethos Discovery does is really clinical trials that they then share all of the results of those trials to any party that's interested without restriction in the commercialization of what they've found into human healthcare. Wow. So I can't go much deeper than that because non-clinical. Dr. Khanna could do a much better job describing it than I can. But if you go to the ethosvet.com site and look at the Discovery tab, you can see a lot about the different work that they're doing and the importance of that work, not only from advancing veterinary medicine, but also that transferability into human healthcare. It's really interesting.
Well, the folks at Ethos Discovery, thank you for explaining that.
Did I say it okay? I don't know. I hope I know I didn't do it justice, but hopefully I didn't misdescribe all of their work because it's really important work and incredible.
Wow. It sounds amazing that Ethos is involved in that type of work because, again, you wouldn't think of an organization involved in veterinary healthcare and services would sort of do that type of thing. So that's amazing. That's fantastic.
Yeah, I think it's a lot of times companies will just put values out there, and that's the other part of my role is to really ensure that the values that we have at Ethos align with how we actually operate and the behaviors that you would see within the organization. And to say innovation is a value, I'm always going to say, well, what's the proof point? How dare we say that's a value if we don't actually do anything innovative?
Right.
So I think, between Ethos Discovery and their connection with all of our hospitals, it's when Dr. Khanna tried to explain it to me when I first started Ethos, I was blown away. And the kind of cool thing about it too is that the Discovery team will work with our hospitals to hear what are those real-time problems that you're experiencing. So it could be a vet tech that says, one of the things I run into with treatment that, it could be more effective if there was something like this, or a DVM, if there was something like this that existed, or if we could connect this and this in some way, that would really improve patient outcomes and quality and effectiveness and speed, all of those magical things. And Ethos Discovery will then take that feedback and start researching, how they could iterate in some sort of innovation process to solve for real problems versus just kind of saying, it'd be interesting to study this. And there's really no connection into, what's really being experienced from DVMs and vet techs and VAs on the front lines. So, they're researching things that actually have transferability into real life problems versus just researching for the sake of researching.
Right, and you must have you're in a unique ability. Ethos Discovery is in a really unique ability because they're connected to all the data points.
Yes.
So I think that's interesting that you've taken that a step further. Let me ask you. Obviously, we're in some very difficult times right now, and it's going to last for a while. And I think, as I mentioned, there's a lot in the news about the impact to human healthcare with what's going on. But I have not seen anything about sort of, animal and pet healthcare. And we talked a little bit about the stresses, but what's going on right now that is either similar or different that it's important to be aware of when it comes to providing services during this pandemic?
Yeah, it's interesting. We have seen increased caseloads at all of our locations, and I mean significant increases in caseloads. So from the volume of patients we're seeing, that has increased. The way we are operating has had to change as well due to the pandemic. So traditionally, you would pull up to one of our hospitals and your animal had an emergency, and you would walk your animal in or carry your animal in, and we would be able to take you back to the room and make recommendations and provide treatment. Now with the pandemic, we're not able to do that. So we have our patients that pull up into the parking lot, and we've had to create new roles at Ethos that are really runner type roles, that are literally going out to the cars and checking in with the families and patients and, kind of helping them get in and out of the building where before, a patient's family would have come in with them. Now the patient family doesn't come in with them. Our priority is to protect our people and the caregivers, and at the same time deliver the exceptional patient care. The way that we can do that is to move to this type of model that we've been operating with since March, which is, you're gonna pull up into the parking lot, and we're gonna come out and meet you and take the pet in for you. And so that's been a change. It's from just the Ethos operating model. It's been a change for us. It's been a change for our patients and their families. We continue to think about how can we best do that model. And we think a lot about how long are we going to need to do that model? Just like everybody else is trying to figure out how long we'll be operating in this type of environment. Ideally we'll move back to that model when it's safe to do that. But we want to ensure that our colleagues are safe and comfortable and as protected as they can be as they treat the patients. So it's been really interesting from just the volume of caseload and then how we've been able to take care of patients differently. We've implemented some texting systems. So how do we get information in and out of the hospital to you in your car? So I think we're trying to come up with, again, back to that innovation, not something that would have been on our roadmap in January, but certainly something that we've had to adapt to like most other businesses.
So I'm curious, why has volume significantly increased? Because all of this sounds like, if I didn't say you were the chief people officer of veterinary, emergency care hospital system, someone could say this exact same thing about Brigham and Women's or Mass General or any hospital system. Like, why has it increased so much, given the fact that, as far as I know, animals can't get COVID-19?
Yeah, so it's not necessarily driven by the animal and COVID-19 issues. It's more in terms of what has been the downstream effect of COVID-19 in terms of just the industry. So what ended up happening in some of our locations is that general practices, which are really our referring vets mostly. So, you would typically take your pet into a general practice, and they would see something that caused concern, and then they would refer you to us.
Okay.
What's happened now is that a lot of those general practices have either reduced hours or have closed temporarily during the pandemic. And so we have seen a lot of different types of cases than we normally would see under, kind of the non-pre-pandemic type time. So the types of cases we're seeing have actually changed, where we would not have seen an animal that needs to have their nails clipped, but we are now. And so, so we have all types of new clients that have come in, and the types of things that they need are different. And, once those general practices start to reopen, fully, then that will probably impact the volume in a way that's a little more manageable. The other thing is, as people are home, the number of quarantine pets, we've all seen it out there. You probably have friends that have done it themselves, right? Where it's like, oh, I'm at home all the time now. Let me go get a quarantine pet. So I think more people are owning pets, and you've seen a lot of clear the shelters where the shelter literally runs out of animals, which is fantastic. Right. So you've got all these people who are new pet owners, or they've gotten additional pets. The other theory too is that, when you work away from home a lot, maybe you don't notice some of these things happening with your pet, because you're not around them quite as much. And so I think there's even some more awareness about what's really going on with your pet, because the amount of time that you spend with your pet now has increased, exponentially, because you're at home.
Right. No, exactly. I think that's really interesting. I think people's relationship with their pets must be changing a bit, because now if you're socially isolated, then you're even more relying on your pet for comfort and for some connection with something.
Right.
So I think that's interesting. But what's going to happen when eventually we will see this change back to some sort of new normal, whether there's a vaccine or whatever? Then how is the pet going to adjust to all of a sudden you're not home 5 days a week, or maybe you're home 3 days, or you're out more? It's going to be interesting. Just like people are looking at the psychological effect on this on humans, someone hopefully is looking at the psychological effect on your pet when it comes to this.
Yeah, I think it's a great point, and it's something that you're seeing more articles come out about. But what's interesting is so many businesses are now adopting a work from home mentality. And so, under that new norm umbrella, I don't know, will there be this huge change for the pets if you're working, and the reason you would have, had this new separation from your pet then that they're experiencing was driven by you having to go to work. If you work for one of the employers who is saying, well, you know what, I don't know that we're going to call everybody back, or we may not call everybody back until 2021. So many companies are rethinking where people have to work. So I don't know. It'll be interesting to see. I agree with you. I hope that is not the case where, our family members with 4 legs have gotten so used to us, and then all of a sudden we're kind of ripped away from them, because that emotion goes both ways. We love them as much as they love us. Sometimes I think they love us more, frankly. Yes. I don't know if you've seen on TikTok. That should tell you I have a teenager. I've been on TikTok, and they've had these funny, kind of streams where you kind of put the camera up, and then your pet is lying there minding its own business, and you go up and invade its space, and either kind of lie down on them or whatever, and you see the reaction. And I mean, you can just see the love that pets have for people, because the owner will lay down on him. They can't see the pet's reaction, but the pet is like, oh, it's like they melt when the owner is snuggled up with them. And so it's just one of those beautiful things, the relationship between the families and whatever their pet is, if it's birds, cats, bunnies, horses. We have an exotics doctor in one of our locations, and I love kind of seeing the pictures that we put out of some of the exotics that he's treating. I saw a goose, I want to say it was a few weeks ago. I mean, it's just amazing to see the variation of pets that come through the doors.
How has the relationship with your two rescue dogs? I think it's Sammy and Duncan.
Oh, gosh.
Has that changed at all now that you're home? Like, are you feeding them more treats? Are you?
Well, see, I told you that the one has a weight issue now. Yeah, so they're two totally different dogs. Duncan is in like 9, we think. You never really know. You have the vets can give you an estimate, but we didn't get him as a puppy. We rescued him when we think he was a year or 2 years old. And he was just the most sad, pathetic little guy ever. Just skin and bones, and had a tough life. And when we went to rescue an animal, we went in, and he honestly we found each other, right? He was the one that was in the back of the cage, all the way in the back corner. We went up to see him. He would not. He was so scared. He wouldn't come up to see you. And so then we were like, yeah, that's the one. He's the one that needs love, because he's so scared. And so he is just the sweetest, kindest, gentle dog ever. Probably 45 pounds. He's a greyhound something mix. And then Sammy is a red retriever that, again, we think he's probably around 2.5. And he is a red retriever something. And he is a stage 5 clinger. He is like hyper. He needs to be like under your feet every minute of the day. When I heard the barking, I'm like, yeah, I bet that's Sammy. But yeah, I had been, kind of looking at puppy pictures one morning before I was flying out for the day. And my husband saw me looking at the puppy pictures, and I said, "Oh, it's so cute, don't you think?" And I left, and I hopped on a flight, and I was actually flying to 2 different cities that day. And so he was texting me before I got on the first flight. I landed from that flight, and he was sending me this sequence of pictures throughout the day that started with my family at home looking at puppy pictures on rescue sites. And then I'd land, and the next picture was they're in a car driving to a location. And then I'd go into a meeting, and I'd come out, and then there's a picture of them in the Humane Society, playing with a puppy. And then I hopped on another flight, and then, it continues. And then my last flight, I landed, and there was a puppy in our front yard. So
that's great.
Yes, so that's how we got Sammy. I was actually on a business trip and came home from the trip 3 days later, and there was our puppy.
Oh, wow. Wow. Now, did they wait till you were away, where it's too late for you to stop it, or?
Oh, you know what? I would not have stopped it. Yeah, would not have stopped it. I can't help myself. If I worked, day in, day out in one of our locations, I would be one of those people that has, 6 animals. I would be taking them all home. So it's probably best that I just continue to travel and visit the hospitals versus working 100% in a hospital.
one of the things that was really interesting about you was this 5 red wagon principles. And let's see if I can even show the picture of this, where you actually spoke at, I mean, this is real. You spoke at an event, and there's a little bit of information on it. Can you talk about that? Because it seems like this is so innovative and just unique, but has real heart to it. I would love to know more about that.
Yeah, so that was me presenting at this Global People Con for Coca-Cola. So they had put together this week of presentations and keynotes for their entire global team. And so they had brought in these amazing presenters like Adam Grant and Daniel Pink.
Wow.
And then somehow I ended up on the lineup, and I was like, how did I land this keynote next to Daniel Pink and Adam Grant? But thank you. And so really the premise of Red Wagon principles and thinking actually has a dog connection, believe it or not. The idea is really around taking risk. And I think it's interesting for people in general, but I think it's interesting for people who work in the HR profession, because it's just not generally part of their core DNA is to take risk. Their job is actually to mitigate risk. Right. And so when you have somebody in my type of role who's like, let's do it, it's unusual at times for that. And so so Red Wagons was really this way to start to frame up this idea of taking risk and putting yourself out there. And when you fail, that's okay. I have failed plenty of times, but it doesn't stop me from taking risk. And I think some of that is just, in your upbringing where you're taught, listen, take a chance. If you fail, the learning is going to be so worth figuring it out. And a lot of times you don't fail. So it's made up in your brain to be so much more than what it actually is. And if you never take your toes over the line of can I or can't I, you never really fully understand what you can achieve. And so I was trying to think of how do I take all of these thoughts and stories around risks I've taken and how they've turned out, and where did it really start? Where did this risk-taking behavior start? And so I tracked it back to my grandma's driveway in West Virginia. So my grandma lived in West Virginia, and she had her house kind of tucked down a hill. At the top of that hill was her driveway. And so her driveway is super steep. You would go straight down, and then there was this hairpin turn to the right to get into her garage. And so I really think the beginning of my risk-taking behavior and like this love of adrenaline and the rush started because I was bored at my grandma's house in West Virginia, and I found this red wagon in her garage. And me, being a kid and not using logic as my first guiding principle, I saw this red wagon. I'm like, what am I going to do with this? I can just pull it around her driveway, boring. And so I decided I would take it to the very top of her driveway and turn it around with that black handle in the front. And I would ride it down her steep driveway and take a hard right at the bottom. And so I was like, well, I can't do this alone. And I tried to talk, my sister into it. We had a neighborhood friend. I tried to talk her into it, and, they're smarter than I am. And they're both like, no. Wait, you want to do what? I'm like, yeah, I want to do this. It's going to be great. It's going to be fun. No. And so the poor family dog became my partner, my co-pilot. And so I grabbed the family dog and threw her in the wagon with me. And we went up to the top of my grandma's driveway, and I put her in front of me, and I had my legs on the outsides of the red wagon. you have that like teetering at the top, where your heart's pounding, and so I was like, oh, here we go. And I can't even imagine what the dog was feeling. Like, that's the ride or die, right? That's why people love their pets so much. Your dog is your ride or die. Like, they're with you. I'm with you. You want to do it? Let's do it. And so we went careening down my grandmother's driveway, and two-wheeled it like Tokyo Drift, to the side. And it worked out for a few times. And then finally she got smart enough to not let me throw her in that wagon anymore, because she got a taste of what I was going to do.
Exactly.
But yeah, so it really started to frame up when I start to think through risk and where did it start for me, and this love for it. It really kind of starts when I was a kid and playing with that red wagon and feeling that rush of adrenaline and realizing, it can be done, even though other people said, you're crazy, why would you do that? I did, of course. Like my grandma's driveway, you either went straight off the edge into like pine trees, or you made the right hand corner. And there were a few times where I went straight off into the pine trees. But, I dusted myself back off and pulled the wagon back up. And that's just kind of how I think about things now is there are these red wagon opportunities where people may say you're crazy. People may not want to get in with you, and that's okay. Right. But that doesn't mean that you should limit your thinking to what others may say. You should do what you think is right and measure the risk. And if you're comfortable that the risk level is one that you can recover from, if it doesn't go well, go for it.
Now, are these written down anywhere? Have you mentioned I found a website and it mentioned you were going to write a book or something. So is there a document that if someone wants to say, I need to see this, where do they go?
Yeah, so it's interesting when I delivered this keynote at Coca-Cola, there was an audience member that does he takes notes with drawings. Yes. And so afterwards, he had felt the connection so much, he actually sent me the drawing. I need to put it might actually be in one of the pictures on that website. It is, but it's
kind of tough to see it.
Yeah, I need to pick back up my writing. I was writing, and then I put it down, and I need to finish writing all of the thoughts to make that into the book, because it resonated with people in a way I hadn't really thought it would. I thought it might be interesting for people, but I think it really resonated, and people started thinking about, well, Holly's just a regular person. I mean, I'm not, there's nothing special in me that has set me up for better success than anyone else. Or, I'm a mom with 2 kids and 2 dogs and, live in the burbs. There's nothing special about me that screams, well, she would be better prepared to take that risk than anyone else. It's not true. So everybody has this in their core DNA. It's just whether you choose to tap into it or not.
Yeah, I was watching another Facebook Live from, I think, Jim Edwards, who has written copywriting books and stuff. And he was saying everyone should write a book. And he had an interesting philosophy, which is to write down 20 questions that you would want to ask someone who's interested in this, give it to a friend, have them ask you, and then record it and have it transcribed and little edit. And there's your book, like in, a week, rather than trying to think about it. Yeah. And I was like, I gotta write a book. I
need to write that down.
Yeah. People, it's, you do have a really interesting background, but you've invented this. And especially right now during this time, I think, first of all, people have time to do that, to self-improve. But also, I think people are really interested in this type of thing, and risk taking, how do you do it? And yeah, you should. That's sort of a model that he came up with, and he's written a bunch of books. But he says ebooks is one thing, but having a printed book and you just send it to Amazon and they'll print it, like it makes all the difference because people want to hold something.
Yeah, I think this is a challenging time, but it's a time where you can be a little opportunistic at the same time. Again, just really understanding where you are in your life and the amount of risk that you're comfortable with. And to me, it's never just a static level of risk. It ebbs and flows based on where I am in my life. So, I may take more risk personally and less risk professionally at times. I may take more professional risk and less personal. The main thing is really understanding yourself in this process and being open to the road as it reveals itself in front of you. Sometimes you can have such a narrow view or vision of what you can or should be, and you limit yourself. And right now, as markets are changing, industries are changing, you may see that this is a great opportunity that you've been in, retail your entire life.
Right.
Or me, I've been in human healthcare my entire life. I've had a million different types of roles within human healthcare, and I've had global experience working in human healthcare. But this was a really cool opportunity for me to learn veterinary medicine, and again, really start to pin together the transferability of what I'd already done in my career to this industry that I would have initially thought, well, I don't know that I have anything that I can share. I don't come from that industry. Well, guess what? So many industries prepare you for other industries. And so, my other plug is, take a look at veterinary health and medicine right now. If you have a passion for animals and quality of care for animals, even if you don't work in this field right now, you should take a look at it and see, is this the right time for you to explore something, in a different industry like veterinary medicine? And Ethos has, we have 300 openings right now. So we have, we have a fantastic story, which is you hear so many companies that are unfortunately in a position where they're letting people go and furloughing. We have the opposite, and we are hiring at incredible levels throughout all 25 locations. So consider us. We have a location probably right by you.
Wow.
And if we don't, we have some remote roles. So
and people find all this at Ethos Vet. I think I've got even a banner somewhere about this, ethosvet.com.
Yes. Yeah. Hit the apply now button and you'll see all the different roles. A lot of the roles at the more, thank you, don't require extensive background. And that's why I said this could be a time for people to even think about pivoting career-wise or industry-wise. There are positions that require, no veterinary medicine experience. There are positions in our home office that are, kind of your standard project management, those types of roles. So we've got over 2,000 colleagues right now. So, So we would love to have you as maybe 2001.
The last thing I want to touch on, I brought up earlier, which is pathways to independence. Because I looked it up, and that seems, obviously you're passionate about it, you're on the board. I would love for you to just talk about that a little bit, so people are aware of it, because I think it's doing amazing work.
Thank you. Yes. So Pathways to Independence is a nonprofit that I have the pleasure of serving as the president of the board for. And what Pathways does for over 30 years in the St. Louis area they have worked with adults with developmental disabilities. And that could look like a lot of different things. It could be Asperger's, it could be a certain level of autism. It could mean that there's some physical challenges to a participant as well. Most of our participants live with their parents their entire lives, and they are looking for ways to socialize with people. A lot of times with our participants, you may not meet them and realize that they have some sort of developmental disability. And so they may come across a little bit, awkward to you or quiet, or they do things in a certain routine way that doesn't make sense to you, but it makes sense to them. And so a lot of times when you have somebody who is potentially on the spectrum, they have a hard time forming those social connections. And so they become very isolated. And so what we do is we really work with adults who, programming through the government is potentially ended at 18 and they have no other social outlet. We provide that social outlet and then training for them. We've even had some things on dating, believe it or not, how do you how do you date? How do you do these things? How do you interview for a job? We have things that we call social college, which again, it's just helping develop social skills so they feel more comfortable interacting with anyone and everyone and holding a position where they feel confident. The participants are absolutely amazing, and their families, my gosh, are just amazing as well. It's not hard to want to work with Pathways and our participants because they're just an amazing group. And the programming for us with the pandemic has changed immensely too. So you can imagine if your whole model is around in-person social activities where you could be going bowling, you could be going, we would hold an annual picnic.
Right.
We had fundraisers at restaurants, and now none of that exists. And so I just am amazed at how well the Pathways team was able to pivot from this all in-person programming to all virtual and do it in a way where the participants don't feel isolated, even though they are at home. We looked at it as an opportunity to connect them in a more technological way. So, how do we help them learn how to get onto the internet? How do we help them learn, how to do a Zoom call or whatever it is? So there was opportunity again. If you look for the opportunity, there's one out there. There's some positive nugget that you can glean from anything. And so we were able to say, well, boy, this wasn't part of the 3-year strategic plan to do programming this way, but our participants need us. So we're going to figure this out, and we're going to figure it out quickly. And so I'm just so proud that we've been able to continue to serve that population in a different way. And it's forced us to do some different innovation that never would have been on our roadmap.
Wow.
We would have told you that's the exact opposite of what we want to do.
That's amazing. Well, I cannot thank you enough for taking some time and doing this. And as I mentioned, Facebook is fantastic about just recirculating this on everyone's feed. So I really appreciate it. And, you have an amazing background. It seems like you're in the right place at the right time, particularly with what's going on right now, and will probably extend for at some point. I just want to put up that your friends over there said, definitely echo, come work with us. And Kelly wrote, "Go Holly." So you have friends there rooting for you. So, but thank you very much. Where people just want to learn more at ethosvet.com.
Yes. And I have to just throw in one last thing, which is to say thank you to all of our Ethos colleagues. I know that it has been challenging to say the least. You heard I'm trying to put a plug in to hire more people. I know you need more resources. And I just want to say thank you to our entire Ethos team for for working so hard and reminding you to take care of yourselves in this process as well. But thank you for all that you do to take care of our patients and their families. You are so appreciated, and we can't say it enough.
That's fantastic. I'm sure they'll see this and appreciate the sentiment.
Well, Jeff, thanks so much. This was great. I was looking forward to this all week, and I so appreciate you inviting me, and it was a pleasure and an honor.
Well, thank you. And I'll just show I've got a URL, My Dog Brandy. If you go there, you'll see all the lists where the podcast I have. The goal is to do interviews like this and just tell stories about my dog. I mean, it's kind of crazy. This whole thing originated for me when I took a course and I was trying to come up with a podcast idea, and I had a bunch of ideas about me. My college friends said, those are nice, but we really want to hear the stories about Brandy. Less about you, more about him. So I was like, okay, once again, he's no longer with us, but he gets in my life. So that's great.
They
well,
never
thank you
leave
very
it.
much.
Their soul is always with you. So they never, though physically they may not be there, they are always with you.
Yes, I believe he's looking down and, probably laughing, but, definitely probably asking for a bagel. He ate bagels all the time. So,
or an ice
Jewish
cream.
Dog. And ice cream and ice cream. So great. Well, thank you very much.
Thank you. Bye, everyone.